Welcome to Scary Stories. Recently, I've been animating historical cryptid sightings in large part to demonstrate that animation can be used to illustrate real-life occurrences, just the same as it can be used to make talking chipmunks and whatnot. But this is December, and I feel like it's a time when human beings tell stories to each other. I'm hoping to do a nice scary animation for Christmas or something at the end of the month. But mostly, I'd like to get caught up on the backlog of stories I've been sent by you guys out there. These stories you send me are almost always sent anonymously, and they don't have the documentation of sightings and encounters from old Linda Godfrey books. But I'm not going to call you guys liars when you tell me something happened to you personally. Especially not when your allegedly true narrative is as interesting as this next one, which is entitled, My Husband Has a Big Secret. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am one of your viewers who likes the werewolf stories better than the Dogman ones. When you first came on with PQ River back years ago, I used to like the Bigfoot and Dogman stories better. But then I found out about my husband's secret. I find myself starved to learn anything new that I can about werewolves and lichens and whatever else you want to call them. I am referring to the morphers, the ones who change from one kind of person into another, from one species to another. There are a number of different kinds of morphers. Some of these are almost godlike beings who can be anything they want to be on a whim. Stay away from those kinds of morphers. In the old days, they used to call them wizards and things like that. Witches. But they aren't human. It's like they came from outer space almost. Well, maybe I shouldn't say almost. Just stay away from them if you can. Try to stay off their radar. All of the other kinds of morphers and werewolves are, in my opinion, in some way related to those witch wizards. Those things are probably also the basis for the vampire myths, in my opinion. I'm not a scholar. I'm just someone who has been interested in all of this for about 1 year now. Because 1 year ago is when I found out that my husband has an increasingly harder to hide problem with morphing. I will explain my husband's condition, which you can call werewolfism if you'd like, as a kind of shorthand. But I think first I should explain who he and I are, or at least who he and I were, before all of this insanity took over our worlds. I would like to go public with all of this, but I can't, because of who my husband is, and who he works for. In fact, I can't even really explain that part of it at all. Let's say he lives a life of danger and everyone he meets is a stranger. And it was while on duty that my husband became something other than just the man I married. I knew that when I said yes to Martin's proposal that I was asking for trouble, but neither of us could have guessed the direction this all took. Martin is a big man in every way, both outside and in. He's over a head taller than I am, and I was always considered a tall girl and a tall young woman. Martin makes me feel like a shrimp though, and I guess that's what I first liked about him. He's also very soft-spoken and attentive. He listens to me, and I find out about it later when he surprises me by anticipating my needs. He's the only guy I ever went with who bought toilet paper before I did. In some ways, he's the worst possible kind of man to marry, but in others, he's a dream man. I guess he better be, to keep me putting myself in danger the way I do in order to stay with him. That kinda came off as sounding entitled and whiny, so I apologize. Yes, my life with Martin is dangerous, but on the other hand, he devotes himself fully to my protection. It's very exciting to live your life in a spy versus spy cartoon, but it's also messed up if you know what I mean. We don't want to have children now, but we had hoped there would be time to do that someday. It would be insane to do it now though in this atmosphere. We need to be able to move on a dime. Let me explain why that is. The way I first found out that my husband had become a werewolf was not by seeing him as a werewolf. It was by finding him shaving off a full growth of beard one morning when he had not had any beard at all the night before. It was a very surreal experience, so much so that I wondered if I was dreaming. My husband had always been a man who groomed himself to perfection. He wore a little manicured mustache when I first met him, but I was witnessing him that morning cutting off a beard that should have taken months to grow. The hair on his head similarly needed to have inches cut off of it, which was literally impossible, and yet I saw it happen. Now I'm used to this, but at the time, it was like my brain was screaming for relief inside my head. It can make you feel like you're having an attack, when reality starts acting illogical. It wasn't just confusing, it was physically painful. I think I was having a panic attack, but my chest hurt and my heart was beating too fast. Martin was upset too, as he had somehow been hiding all of this from me for weeks leading up to that point. I'm not sure how to proceed. He explained to me how this happened before I actually saw the werewolf transformation, so I guess I should fill in the backstory for you here to the limited ability I can. A lot of this story has been redacted by my husband before I sent it to you, but what is left is this. A project he was working on had some very important people involved. One of them flipped out in a meeting and became violent in the ensuing fighting to subdue this very important individual. My husband became injured, and he accidentally shared some blood with the raging out of control person. At least, that's the way my husband tells it. It's the only explanation that makes any sense, because now my husband has those same rage fits, and when he does, he changes from a man into something entirely different. Martin went back to trying to hide his condition from me for the most part over the next few weeks. He would change into the wolf nearly every single night, it seemed to me, but he would sense it a good hour or two before any real transformation would begin. I knew he was telling the truth, because he would come back in the morning human, but with months of hair and beard growth. It was something to do with metabolism, and I don't really understand it, but somehow his body speeds up while he's the werewolf, or something like that. I don't like it. I can't stand any of this. Life should be easy to understand. There shouldn't be secret illnesses that you have to hide from doctors. None of this is sane. The world is much uglier than they teach you in school. Martin warned me that if I were ever around when he morphed into the wolf, I should remove myself from the situation in the quickest way possible. When he changes, he becomes furiously angry, and sometimes he can be randomly violent. It's not just a hunger that overtakes him. He told me that he becomes cruel and malevolent, truly evil in every sense of the word. I get goosebumps even writing these words down. The idea of my husband becoming someone I should run from in fear, that is extremely unsettling to me, and something I find hard to accept. I finally did meet the werewolf or dogman or whatever you want to call him when he's in that state. We had been out to dinner, and it was just getting dark as Martin drove us home. I noticed that he seemed quieter than usual, and at some point, he just pulled off to the side of the highway, and we got out and switched sides. That was the only time he ever asked me to drive, but he told me he was feeling dizzy, and he was afraid he would black out while driving. He didn't realize it was the werewolf morph coming earlier and differently that night than it ever had before. While I drove north on River Road, we passed that bridge that commemorates Washington crossing the Delaware. And then my husband began to make horrible noises. I asked him if he was all right, but obviously he wasn't. He screamed at me to stop the car, and I was so frightened I hit the gas instead. He screamed louder, and I found myself screaming too, but incoherently, in fear. I finally got my body to obey my mind, and we pulled off by that park they have there for Washington. Martin got out of the car, and as I watched, he started to transform, or morph as he calls it. He screamed in pain, and I did too, each time he did. I wanted to get out and help him, but Martin slammed the car door and shouted at me to drive. I protested stupidly, and then he turned to me in utter rage, no longer anything human at all. In anger, he tore the outside mirror off of that side of the car and used it to smash the door window on the passenger side. Screaming like I was being killed, I drove off northward, with my husband, changing, behind me, and shards of glass all in my hair and clothing. That night I found it hard to sleep, as you might imagine. Every little noise in the night terrified me, as I wondered if the Wolfman thing was going to break through one of the windows and get in at me. Finally, just at the first rays of dawn, I heard a sound from downstairs in our house. Grabbing my husband's baseball bat, I crept down the stairs, telling myself that I was tough and that I could handle this, even though I knew that none of that was the case. Just as I had feared, someone was trying to break in through one of the windows, but they weren't just smashing the glass as I had seen the werewolf do. It looked like some kind of a dark, shadowy figure was trying to pull or jimmy the window open. I froze, confused about what I should do. I decided I should go get my phone and call the cops, but as I turned to run back up the steps to do just that, I heard the window slam up and open behind me, and I screamed in utter terror. My feet got twisted under me on the stairs, and I fell on my behind on one of the upper steps, looking down at the first floor, where my worst fear was realized. The werewolf had followed me home and was now inside my house. I remember screaming, but I don't remember passing out. I know I did, because I woke up being cradled in the warm, muscular arms of the werewolf. I screamed, and I tried to break free from him, but I could see intelligence and kindness in those yellow eyes. He demonstrated that I could go if I wanted to, and suddenly I didn't want to. We collapsed into each other and embraced until I felt him beginning to morph back. Although changing back is less painful and emotional form than becoming the creature, you still don't want to be hugging the guy while it's happening. We achieved an understanding without needing to talk about it. His rage is only uncontrollable during the agonizing morphing process, and until he has vented that rage after the change is complete. I won't say I welcome seeing him or any werewolf, but if it's not immediately after the morph, then I expect it to be Martin, and for him to act like who he is. Martin developed a few hiding spots for himself to stash his keys in after that, but he kept getting followed home by strange things, and we both soon came to feel that having one home all the time was probably not a wise idea. Instead, we move around an awful lot these days. We sold our house, and we don't stay in the same spot 2 nights in a row any longer. We have camping equipment for when the weather is good enough, and we'll sleep in our car if we have to when it isn't. We do occasionally rent hotel or motel rooms. We sometimes stay with relatives, things like that. But, like I said, never more than 1 night in each location. Martin is a werewolf with human attachments, and there are certain kinds of people who find someone like Martin the most desirable kind of creature alive. A feral, unstoppable monster who can be controlled. Anyone who could credibly threaten me could control my husband and make him do whatever they wanted him to do in order to maintain my safety. In that sense, I have become a liability for Martin, and I severely curtail the amount of freedom he can have in life. I also place myself in danger merely by existing. Since he has become a monster, we've had to put off our conversations about the future. We no longer talk about having children. We no longer even talk about the next day. We only discuss survival in that very moment, because that's the only part of life we have the ability to deal with. We can't predict the next second, let alone next week or a month. We can never relax. We can never plan ahead. We meditate and try to keep ourselves in this present moment, but it becomes unbearable to confront your own lack of a future. Life becomes a kind of a living death, and that's the life we're leading right now. Sure, there are things that happen which make me think this would all make a good movie or a TV show, but it's not fun to be living in a movie. Think about it. If things don't keep getting worse for the people in a movie, we get bored with it. We don't want to see them overcome minor obstacles. We want to see them perform death-defying feats for the sake of our entertainment. It's great to watch it on screen, but in real life, it could be an awful lot of stress. The other morning, I was up early making a campfire in camp when I saw a bear walking not 40 feet away through the woods. I froze instead of grabbing the bear spray from inside the tent. In fact, there were a number of smart things I could have done in that moment, but I did none of them. And I think that bear might have been smelling the breakfast I was meaning to start cooking. How could he not be? I really didn't even know what to do. But the werewolf came barreling loudly through the woods toward our campsite and that bear, which spooked the beast. I saw the bear trotting off, rather than deal with whatever was making all that racket. It was incredible to see my husband in that form, all flashing teeth and eyes and claws and muscle, moving quickly to defend that which was his. I felt very safe in that moment, as paradoxical as it might sound. But that's exactly why I want to leave my husband. He's too good a man to give up all his freedom for me. I want to be the mother of his children, but I don't think that can happen. He should have his freedom, and I should have my family. But the idea of giving him up is as alien to me as giving me up is to him. I just don't think either of us would know how to live without the other one, as difficult as this fact might make life for both of us. Sometimes at night I dream that this was all a nightmare, and that our life would reset to what it was back then, before my husband became a morpher. But when I wake from the dream, I find that my unending nightmare has returned, and I don't know how to make things right again, because my husband has a big secret. Well, this episode was supposed to be dedicated to Godzilla Tim Walker in Ireland, who sent us a big donation for food this week. Thank you, Godzilla Tim. But we will formally thank Tim in our next episode because this one is going to be dedicated to Kathy Barrickman. Kathy has gotten some rough news concerning her health, and it looks like she's going to need all the prayers she can get. I don't want to get into details, but from what she's saying, the prognosis is not good. Yes, we should pray for a miracle, but probably more importantly, we should pray for Kathy to be comforted in this time, and for her to be strong no matter what comes next. This might be one of those times when we really don't know what's best for Kathy, and we're going to have faith that some higher source can look out for her, beyond what any of us would be able to do. Kathy, if you're listening, please know that you're a big part of this show, and you always will be, no matter what happens. Good luck, and know that we love you. And now this. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.